Everyone in the meeting is like doing tons of coke. It's the 1980s. And they're like,
Right.
yes, tell me more. And they're like, that don't stop there. Now
No.
I have a character named Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez.
Exactly.
Who do we get to play him? Scottish actor Sean Connery.
It's amazing. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of CinemaBall. I'm here with my co-host and opponent, Ebony Aster. Hey, Ebony.
Hey, Carol.
If you listen to our teaser, you already know what CinemaBall is, but to sum it up really quickly, my current goal is to get both of us to watch the 1998 Jean-Claude Van Damme film Knockoff.
Oh, my God.
I know, every time, right, we realize that is the goal of this endeavor.
I know. I can't believe we both signed up for this, but
yeah,
moving on.
It's so absurd. So Ebony, in our teaser, has kicked the CinemaBall into play by selecting Highlander as our first movie. And so today we are going to discuss that 1986 cult classic. And then at the end of this episode, I'll announce our next film, which has to be directly linked to Highlander through an actor, a director, etc. Ebony, since you selected Highlander, you start us off. Give us a bit of background on this film.
Absolutely. Okay, so if y'all listen to the teaser, you know how excited I was to reveal to Carolyn how delighted I was to talk about this movie. So yeah, Highlander comes out in 1986. And this movie is it's such a perfect little gem of the 1980s. I almost couldn't stand it. Like it was just like going back into my childhood.
Yeah.
And like I was nostalgia for days. Like fuck Ready Player One. Give me Highlander because it gave me everything. So just like a quick overview. So the director is this guy named Russell Mulcahy, right? He's an Australian guy, and he is known, and this will shock absolutely no one when you hear it, he is largely known for directing music videos, which is great because Highlander is essentially a string of music videos strung together.
Those like early MTV sensibilities are just like visible throughout this film. And, he actually directed, a kind of interesting little bit of trivia, he directed the video for the song Video Killed the Radio Star, which was the first video to ever air on MTV. So just a little like historical fun fact there.
Exactly. So, like just iconic, 80s aesthetics going on in this movie. Yeah. Interestingly, so Mulcahy also directed the second film in the trilogy. This is something I just learned today, but apparently hated it so much, he tried to Alan Smithy his way out of it. For those of you who don't know, if a director completes a project and for whatever reason they are like radically unhappy with the final project, they can campaign to have their name taken off and the name Alan Smithy, which is kind of like a generic non-director's name, placed on the project so their real name is not associated with it. Apparently, because he wasn't a member of the DGA, he wasn't able to do that. So he tried to Alan Smithy his way out of The Quickening, which frankly, if you've seen it, I would have too, but wasn't able to do that. So
yeah, I mean, this film spawned not only that sequel, but like I think a total of five sequels, maybe.
Yep, 5 sequels. There's currently 6 movies, but in it, like TV shows
and a
comics,
TV show,
novels, computer games, animated series, and again, learned today that apparently there was a Highlander card game, like a kind of Magic the Gathering kind of situation. So like if you have Highlander needs, the universe is prepared to deliver on those needs.
It absolutely is. There's a vast wealth of Highlander material out there just waiting for you. So, but let's talk about where it all began with this film, Highlander. So, it actually opens with a Sean Connery voiceover, and I read this. This to me is ludicrous. I read this in researching for this episode. Mm-hmm. I think this was on IMDb in their trivia section or something, or it was somewhere. It said the opening voiceover by Connery has an echo effect because it was recorded in the bathroom of his Spanish villa, where and this is the part that that makes me go, what the fuck? Where he had been working on his Spanish accent for the film with a voice coach.
Okay.
Like,
okay, let's wrap up this episode
like
right
Sean
now.
Connery. There is zero accent happening in this film.
Okay, let's just go ahead and start there with the casting for this movie, which at every level is a fucking delight, because
it's fantastic.
You say to yourself, like, okay, we are going to invest some serious money in a wide-ranging, like kind of expansive, fantastical story about a Scottish Highlander. Who do we get to play? We get Frenchman Christopher Lambert.
Yes. Oh.
You know, and then, you know, everyone in the meeting is like doing tons of coke. It's the 1980s. And they're like, yes, tell me more. And they're like, that don't stop there. Now I have a character named Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez.
Exactly.
Who do we get to play him? Scottish actor Sean Connery.
It's amazing. Hearing Sean Connery say that his name is Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez is like, it's that just that moment in and of itself is spectacular.
Oh my God. I never got over it. And I had forgotten before. So, you know, I saw this movie probably, I don't know, 3-4 times when I was a kid, but I hadn't seen it since then. So in the course of rewatching it for this show, I had forgotten that not only is Sean Connery playing a man with the name Juan Sanchez Villalobos Ramirez, but he is actually Egyptian.
That's right. Yeah. He at one point just tosses out on, I'm Egyptian. It's,
I just thought, like, okay, this movie is so committed to just not answering any, like, provoking a lot of questions and then refusing to answer why things are created the way they are. So, yeah, just right there, when you see the casting for this film, it tells you pretty much what you're getting into.
It really does. But, I mean, I have to say, you know, the movie, I cannot really imagine this movie without Lambert at the center of it, because he, I've never seen him in anything that made me think, oh, he's like a legitimately good actor, but because he seems to operate in such a narrow range. But what I think he does have is tremendous just presence and like charisma. And, you know, like a running thing in this film actually is that, you know, his like would-be girlfriend at one point says, you know, you're some people are afraid of dying. That's not your problem. You're afraid of living. Like, he actually is kind of a boring guy. Like but he still on screen has this, like, there's this sense of a controlled energy in him at all times. And it helps too that Russell Mulcahy is such a visual stylist. You know, the very first time we see Connor MacLeod, he's in like Madison Square Garden for to watch a wrestling match for some reason. But that first establishing shot of him as a character, his eyes are just like lit in such a way that, you know, they are just such piercing, like, charismatic, intense eyes in that shot. And immediately, like, I'm into this person as a character. I'm like,
oh yeah, this thing is, I mean, it is absolutely fascinating to watch. The lighting and the staging and the fight scenes is really incredibly well done. Like, don't misunderstand when I say that this movie is essentially, you know, 3 or 4 music videos strung together. I mean that in the best way. Like, the rhythms are great. There is the quickening when it finally happens. It might as well be a heavy metal album cover. It is absolutely beautiful and just like visually impactful. And you can't take your eyes off it.
Yeah. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, you know, if they were to remake this film today, it would be some like elaborate CGI thing happening there. But in this, it's like hand-drawn animation or something, like just layered over the film, and it has such a distinctive effect, you know, of the energy swirling and everything. It's you know, and I sometimes think, well, there's a certain character that films I mean, obviously, like, there are still directors who use practical effects and everything, and thank goodness for that, because I love that stuff. But I do feel like, the tendency to rely on CGI for so much stuff, we have sort of lost something in the visual character of, like, contemporary cinema.
Yeah. It's interesting, actually, just to go back to your statement about Christopher Lambert and, like, his presence on screen. I had a different reaction, but now, Carol, as often happens when we get together, I am forced to question my reaction and wonder if maybe there was something going on that I wasn't picking up on. So Christopher Lambert, I know him from Highlander, and I know him from Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, which is another movie I loved in the 80s. And I remember thinking he was so great in that. But in this, I kept thinking, like, is the issue that he's not a good actor, he's not conveying emotional, but I think you might be right, that there's something about Christopher Lambert and the way he looks and the way he holds himself and his very intense gaze in this movie that does demonstrate to you that there's a lot going on behind the eyes.
And to me, that results in a fascinating dichotomy between him and this film's wonderful, wonderful villain, Kurgan, or the Kurgan, played by Clancy Brown. And this character, I mean, he's a monster. He's absolutely but he lives. I mean, he has such a lust for life on every level. And so he is sort of, the opposite of MacLeod in that sense of just like, I mean, every moment that he's on screen, Clancy Brown is just doing something like wild and exciting, like really exciting.
Like grabbing someone and throwing them across the room, or growling, or just vibrating with energy. Clancy Brown, talk about like the 80s being in full effect in this movie. The Kurgan's visual aesthetic is straight out of a middle-aged man's fever dream about the dangers of punk and heavy metal, right? So like the Satanic Panic, Punk Peril, it was absolutely, all he needed was and he might have had, and I missed it, safety pin earrings, and it would have completed the look.
And there's also there's a shot in this film where the camera is in front of him as he's walking sort of toward the camera down this narrow hallway in a really cheap Fleabag hotel in New York City. And it was very reminiscent to me. Actually, so the James Cameron's The Terminator came out in 1984, I believe. So it actually preceded this film. But, there's the famous scene in The Terminator where the Terminator goes to the police station and just kills everyone, just shoots everyone up. And there's a similar shot in that of the camera in front of him as he's just walking down the hall, just shooting people left and right. And I thought, the Kurgan has evokes a similar kind of physical, hulkingness and unstoppability. But unlike the Terminator, there's also this almost goofiness to the Kurgan. He's kind of clumsy sometimes, but he just is so brute force powerful that it doesn't matter that he's kind of goofy and clumsy, but he has that element to him too, which I love.
Well, speaking of the goofiness, what did you think about the tone of the movie? Because occasionally I felt like the humor would be kind of weirdly placed, and kind of oddly situated. And I didn't know if this was because I thought Lambert had kind of a hard time selling it with his very particular, completely unidentifiable, vaguely European accent, because, I didn't have the same trouble with Sean Connery, who is pretty much a parody of himself, right? So anything he delivers, he embraces the larger than life, the campiness, the ludicrousness of it.
He was just, at this point in his career, he was just taking fat paychecks to do the Sean Connery thing, to be the Sean Connery character, you know?
Well, apparently, he was somewhere in a Spanish villa, you know, telling the director, like, I'm working on my Spanish accent.
My Spanish accent. Oh, my God. Amazing.
So good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, so the humor in the film is just, I mean, a lot of it's just really bad and dated. Like, I mean, I don't even know if it passes for humor, but there's a line, we sort of, for a while, we follow these cops, who ultimately don't really serve any function in the story other than to, like, provide, like, give the film an excuse to be, for exposition. One of them is famous character actor and Coen brothers like staple John Polito.
Yes.
Who I literally did not recognize because, he's like a little younger and maybe thinner in this film, but most importantly, he had no mustache. And like, how am I going to recognize John Polito without a mustache?
I was lucky in that I did recognize him, but purely because, as you say, Coen Brothers, staple. Yeah. I can't see him now without thinking of that scene from The Big Lebowski where he's like, can't you help out a brother Seamus? So like every time he was on screen, I was like, come on, help out a brother Seamus.
Yeah, right. So, but at the police station, like there's a quote unquote joke, I guess, in the film where the sort of old, jaded workhorse cop Frank, who you see him and you immediately know this character because he's got the styrofoam cup of coffee in his hand. He's that detective.
Yeah.
He gets off a phone call and he says something like, that guy's Vietnamese neighbor ate his dog.
Oh,
and it's
Jesus,
like this,
yeah.
This really like, come on,
Right. The
so
casual racism that you could just toss off in a police precinct and have it be okay in the 80s.
Yeah. But I took so many screenshots actually during this film of just moments that just visually to me were so striking and so beautiful. I'll probably in the blog post for this episode on our website, I'll probably include some of those just as like a little gallery of like what I think are some of the cooler images in this film.
Cool. I think what you should do is put them side by side with some Nagel prints because basically anytime they were up against like the silhouette of a cityscape, I was like, this is like a Nagel print. Children, Google it. Nagel. Nagel. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about here and you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember that.
And there's just another like ludicrous plot detail that I have to mention. So there's this the woman who works in forensics at the police station and who's kind of Brenda. Thank you. Like, okay, I have to try to find it in my notes here.
While you're looking for that, can I just say, so I have several questions
All right,
about this movie. One of them is about Brenda, and I was like, and basically, it's just a rhetorical question. You mean to tell me that this woman who just happens upon this police forensics specialist, just happens to also be a world-renowned expert on swords?
That's exactly what I was looking for. Is the title of the book that she wrote, which is this? It's this huge fucking tome, and the title just happens to be A Metallurgical History of Ancient Sword Making. Like, I mean, like she has to be the world's premier scholar, expert, everything on that stuff, and she just happens to be the like forensics.
Yeah, she just happens to be in that precinct in New York in this period of time.
Like, why aren't you like
lucky?
Why aren't you teaching metallurgical sword making at Columbia or something instead of like, I don't know.
It was the again, this goes back to what I was saying about the film and just not bothering to answer questions, like, just throwing stuff out there and being like, just deal with it, okay? Just deal with it. And actually, there's a way in which this movie doesn't bother to really explain itself, and none of the internal logic holds up when you really parse it out, right? And that's kind of marvelous.
Yeah, when MacLeod even asks Sanchez, why am I this way? His response is like, why does the sun rise in the morning? Or whatever. Like,
very good impression.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And that's allowed to stand, right? And it's like, no, I'm gonna need a little bit more.
Yeah.
I grew up thinking I was a normal person.
Right.
I was mortally wounded in battle, came back to life, and now you're just telling me it is what it is. I'm gonna need a little bit more from you. But I think, okay, so the movie comes out in 1986. It's not, a critical or popular success immediately, right? But it becomes this huge cult film and spawns this, just incredibly expansive franchise. But no one knew at the beginning when this was released that was going to be necessary. There was a time when, fantastic films could do, like genre films could do this in a way that I don't think modern films are allowed to do. Like modern audiences kind of expect and demand really detailed and nitty gritty world building, and in a way they almost expect a franchise from the first get-go, right? So they want to know that there's an incredible backstory on everyone, that there are answers to absolutely everything, that every side character who walks by in the background that you can screenshot on YouTube has a name, etc. But this film doesn't give you that. I mean, later they build upon it in the franchise, but in this first one, it really is just a giant, like, fuck you, deal with it.
And I think you're absolutely right. Like, I think that there is a very common way today of approaching films as, like, every film has a kind of puzzle box to be solved or something. And I just find that to be such a reductive way of having a relationship with cinema, or and that's one reason why Annihilation was exhilarating to me as a film, is because it allowed for more ambiguity. It didn't really try to, if you come to Annihilation wanting, like, all the answers, you are gonna walk out, pissed off, and and I'm glad that the film is willing to do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I haven't seen Annihilation. I mean, I know that the movie is based upon a book that is part of a trilogy, correct?
Yeah.
So I wonder if that will, if what you're saying there will be allowed to continue in the movies that I assume will be filmed from now. I don't know if the success of the first film will allow for that. But yeah, just, like you said, this kind of demand for any potential answer I might conceivably have about a film. We want the creators, the writers, the directors, whatever, to be as, to be obsessive fans of their own work and the way that we are. I don't know. I just think, like, fandom right now, I don't want to use the term entitled, but there's a sense of that, right? Like, we want absolutely every impulse of ours to be catered to, and we're not used to anymore dealing with these films that are like, this is what it is, this is what I'm giving you. In a sense, I want you to revel in the fact that this is, like this movie might as well be, something that two 10-year-olds back and forth between themselves. Like, what if you had a sword and, like, you were actually from ancient Egypt, but then you were living in France and you had a castle, and, like, then we fight, and then, like, there can only be one of us, whatever.
Yeah.
This film says, just enjoy yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. One thing I want to touch on before we wrap up our conversation is like the moments in this film in which I sense the kind of, like, subtle queer subtext. So
get into it.
So as Juan is teaching Connor about himself, like, there's this kind of whole section of them almost kind of, like, frolicking on the beach, you know? And there's like so much, like, exuberance and joy. Like, this is one of the moments where we do see MacLeod really, like, expressing a real emotion, like joy and like, he's living life, and just there's something about, like, some of those shots that sort of, it's like I could see this in a, swap out one of them for a woman, and I could see this exact shot pretty much in a straight, romantic film from that period. Also, on the more kind of like disturbing, but really I think effective side, the Kurgan when he's like taking refuge in this church, he like licks this priest comes up to him and is like, "Sir, I'm gonna have to, this is the house of God," because he's being a big obnoxious oaf, and like he takes the priest's arm or hand and just like licks like all the way up, and it's this great, like really powerful moment. And I love, like, on his way out of the church, I think Kurgan just says, like, just kind of almost for like no reason, he announces to like the few people who are there, "It's better to burn out than to fade away."
Oh boy, Clancy Brown has never failed to deliver in any role. Yeah. I mean, the guy like has never met a piece of scenery that he doesn't want to just gnaw on and just give it to you. I loved it.
And he has a one-of-a-kind voice that just, it lends itself to that so well.
Yeah, but on the other hand, he can also be Mr. Krabs from SpongeBob SquarePants. The guy is multi-talented.
Absolutely.
Before we move on, I have to ask you this question, because this also sent me around the bend. So, this drove me absolutely cuckoo. So apparently Connor MacLeod has been perpetrating this massive real estate fraud for decades, potentially centuries, on this particular loft in New York. And the idea is that he finds the name of a young male child who has died, and then transfers the loft, like the deed, into that kid's name. And then takes on that kid's identity. My question to you, Caro, and I demand answers, is how, in a real estate market like New York, is no one catching on to this year on year?
I really don't know. I think that is by far the most implausible thing about this film.
Yes. But I hate that that's the thing that like took me right out of the movie. But I was just like, well, there's just no way that the co-op board is going to let this happen.
But I totally understand him wanting to hang on to that place, because it is so cool. And my favorite thing about it is that he apparently seems to have this like private chamber of just stuff that he's collected from like through the centuries, and sometimes he just like likes to go and retreat and be with his stuff in his like private chamber of stuff.
Yes.
Like, dude, you've got it made, man. You're doing all right.
It's just, it's beautiful. I love, absolutely. But I was like, you know what? You wouldn't have this trouble if you lived in upstate New York maybe just had like a little farmhouse. But this leads into another question of mine. At what point do the immortals stop aging, right? So do you stop aging at your first death, or like, how does it work? Because again, if Connor MacLeod, or blanking on whatever fake name he was using, but if
Nash,
he's Connor
MacLeod, Nash.
So if he's, Nash one day, and then like he goes away, and everybody on the co-op board here's like, oh yeah, Mr. Nash died, but he gave his loft to Joe Blow, and then Joe Blow appears and looks exactly the same as Nash.
Ebony, you gotta let it go. You gotta just,
I know.
People in New York, they're very busy. They're too caught up in their own lives. They don't have time to notice the small details.
If you say so, Carolyn. If you say so.
All right, so let's start taking it home with one of our special segments.
Yes.
We call this Freakcast Recast, and this is where we share the actors we would cast in this film's leading roles if it were being made today.
Yes.
So, Ebony, we'll start with you. Who would you cast as MacLeod in your contemporary remake of Highlander?
Yeah, okay, so this is not, an out of the blue kind of choice. This is going to seem, pretty generic, but I want you to think about it. Like, don't knee-jerk reject this. I'm going to suggest Chris Hemsworth.
Oh, okay.
He's got like the bodily heft, you know, that I think like you think Highland warrior, like I buy it. But he's also got great comedic timing that I think will come through to support the inherent ludicrousness of a film like this. He looks good with long hair as a Highlander in the past, and then in the short hair in the present. So I'm putting forth Chris Hemsworth.
You know, my pick, I just thought, you know, I only really thought about my pick in terms of the modern scenes in the film. Mm-hmm. I think he would do fine there, but now that I think about him in the flashback scenes, I'm a little less sure. But my choice, because really what I was thinking, my line of thought was, well, who's somebody who can sort of seem dull and uninteresting on the surface, and yet for whatever reason you still find them like compelling or charismatic, even though they seem like really flat. And so my pick wow,
Carol is about to fly to Los Angeles just to slam a door in my face.
I mean, no, Lee. I mean, I actually think it's a good thing. Like, so I actually think Lee Pace could do that quite well. But my original pick was Ryan Gosling.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. You know what? Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Yeah.
Cool. Moving on to one via. I can't remember, but
but the movie doesn't care either, right?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
So I have two selections here.
All right.
And I am gonna take the bold stance that we should actually fucking pay attention to the mythology the film sets up, right?
All right.
If the guy is, you know, like, we want someone Spanish speaking, right? I'm going to go not with Spain, but with Mexico. And I choose the Spanish actor, Damian Bashir, who I think is just an amazing actor. And I think, you know, if folks know him, they might know him from the American version of The Bridge. That's what I know him from. But I think you could do something really cool about Mexico in the past and like the Mayans or something. Like, how long has this guy been around? You know, like this. So often when we get films or novels or whatever of this type, you know, we're exploring like a particularly European history. And I'm like, but what about the history of other great civilizations of the past, right? Okay, so if we go that, I got Damian Bashir. But if we lean into him being Egyptian, there's an Egyptian actor I like called Khalid al-Nabawi. I'm pronouncing his name wrong. But I think another dude who, like, if you look him up, he just has that kind of gravitas, you know? And that kind of, like, quiet intimidation factor that you think someone who's been around for millennia, you know, would have... would absolutely earn. So those are my two picks.
You thought about this much more seriously and in depth than I did. I was like, you know, I was thinking about those fun scenes, kind of like the scenes on the beach and everything, and like who's an actor who can kind of who you can kind of see as like a mentor, but not like but it's also fun and likable and funny and stuff. And so my pick was Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson.
Oh my God! Once again, I love it. That's absolutely perfect. All right, I take back both of my selections.
No. I mean, I think I like our two different visions here. You know, I think they both have a lot of merit.
Oh my God. Yeah, give The Rock, he should be in every movie. There should be at least a cameo role in every film for The Rock. So, right on. All right, what about the Kurgan? Who do you got for the Kurgan?
So, I was just thinking, man, who can just be, who has the charisma and can make being like evil just seem really fun and just like exciting. And, so this is, I don't think this actor has been in specifically this type of role before, but I'd love to see them do it. I picked Michael B. Jordan.
Ooh.
Yeah. Like I think in Black Panther, like he's so great as a villain, but that character is all very controlled, very driven, very focused, and I'd love to see what Michael B. Jordan does with a character where, you know, who has all that charisma and energy, but is like a little more off the rails, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. My version of the Kurgan, stick with me. I want a little bit of the kooky energy from The Fifth Element and a little bit of the ass kicking from Resident Evil. That's right. I'm talking about Mila Jovovich as the Kurgan.
Yes.
Also is Russian. So I just feel like the role casts itself.
I love it. Yeah, that's awesome. All right, so I'm sure we'll both be hearing from Hollywood producers shortly. Bidding on our different competing Highlander reboots.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our next little segment is playlist or nay list. Highlander has songs by the legendary rock band Queen. But for me, like, and I like a lot of these songs, and I think that the way that they are used in the film is sometimes really inspired. Like, there's a section toward the end where the Kurgan has kidnapped what's her face, and because she's so like not developed that I don't
yeah.
But and he's like speeding down the bridge, and he's grinding the car against the rails, and there's sparks flying, and there's this kind of drunk sounding rendition of like New York, New York by Queen on the soundtrack. And I'm like, yeah, oh God, that's perfect. It's perfect for this moment in the film. I don't know that any of these songs are gonna make it into my personal like collection, but I have to say I have been sort of humming to myself and in my head singing over the past few days, who wants to live forever when love must die. So,
I am adding this stuff to my Spotify playlist. I love nothing more than a Wembley Arena-sized rock jam. Yeah. I have said it before. I will continue to say it. When I'm listening to rock music, it better make me want to fuck somebody or kill somebody. Those are the only two emotions I recognize. This soundtrack delivers on every level for those two needs. Like use it to pump yourself up when you're running on the treadmill, when you're doing, kickboxing class, whatever.
Yes.
I'm into it. Queen soundtrack, yes.
Boom. Random or quick tangent. I don't know if you're familiar with the film Iron Eagle,
yes.
And that's like, I always, when I think of Queen and movies, I think of, like Louis Gossett Jr. as kind of the stern pilot.
Yeah.
But then like by the end, with this punk kid, really talented, phenom pilot who always is listening to like Queen when he's flying, and by the end, Louis Gossett Jr. is like, I could get used to this.
Let me ask you this, Carol. You think Iron Eagle, when you think Queen soundtrack, you don't think Flash Gordon? That is very interesting to me.
Oh, so, I have to say, Flash Gordon maybe a little bit early for me and I somehow just kind of missed that whole phenomenon.
Well,
yes. Of course I know Flash, I know that, but I never really...
You know what? I'm starting to think that whoever suggested karaoke, femme-free karaoke, and last night's Twitch stream was onto something. We need to get you in front of a mic singing your greatest hits.
All right. So finally, it's time for us to actually like render our verdicts on this film. On each episode, we're gonna rate the films, and we'll keep a list of all the ratings in the document that you can find in the accompanying podcast description. So that'll just be added to each week as we, talk about another film. But we're using an interesting rating system. Ebony, tell the folks at home a bit about the system we'll be using.
Yeah, so my brother, shout out to Brian, is convinced that the standard movie rating systems that people are accustomed to, whereby you give something 4 out of 5 stars, 3 out of 5 stars, whatever, something out of 5 stars, or even, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. He says these rating systems are insufficient. They do not allow for enough nuance,
yes,
enough shades of gray. And
yes.
so my brother has started to utilize and wishes to promote his 100-point system.
100 stars,
100
right?
stars, that's
100
right.
stars.
We have 100 stars to give.
Yes.
And so
I feel rich with stars,
Exactly. Like there's so much we can do here. And I feel like this really allows us to pinpoint our exact feelings about a film. So
with surgical precision.
Exactly. So I will say in this our inaugural episode of Highlander, I am giving this film 63 stars.
Okay. All right. I am gonna go. I'm going just a bit higher. I am awarding it 71 stars. Wow. 71 out of 100. So kind of in the same ballpark there.
Kind of, but you gave it a passing grade. I am essentially telling Highlander it needs work. See me after school.
I mean, I think that it's not a film that is going to enrich your life. It's not a film that your life is going to be lacking, some meaningful piece if you don't see it. But for me, the visual sensibilities and the images throughout make it a very sort of worthwhile and entertaining watch. So
right on.
71 for me. Now it's time. Now, Ebony, this I have to tell you. You have no idea how difficult and painful this was for me because, I was staggered by the amount of choices that I saw available to me when I started looking into the filmographies of Clancy Brown, of course Christopher Lambert. I mean, we all know Sean Connery has a massive filmography and everything. But what my real dilemma came down to was that there was a film that I could have selected. Christopher Lambert is one of the actors in an acclaimed film that I have been wanting to see for years, directed by acclaimed director Claire Denis, a film called White Material. Very serious film. But unfortunately, for reasons of strategy, and moving towards my goal of Knockoff, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, with great pain, I had to go in a completely different direction.
Oh no!
The next film we are watching, I'm afraid, Ebony, it's a film called, and wait for it. Kickboxer Retaliation.
I hate you so much. Oh my god.
Kickboxer Retaliation. Now, Christopher Lambert is in this film. Also Jean-Claude Van Damme. Also Mike fucking Tyson. This is actually a brand new 2018 film. It's already on Amazon streaming services.
Wow. Okay.
But it is a so it is a sequel or a new entry in the long-running legendary Kickboxer series of films. I'll just read just to tantalize our two listeners and encourage them to maybe watch the film so that they can be in on the discussion, in next week's episode. This is just the tiny little description from when you just Google the film. 1 year after avenging his brother's murder, MMA champion Kurt Sloan finds himself imprisoned by a powerful gangster in Thailand. To win back his freedom, he must train for a fight against a 400-pound killer in an underground death match. Yes!
I am struck dumb by
Budget. The film's budget was $13 million US. Its take at the box office, $98,000.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
So this is gonna be
Carolyn,
fun.
I will get you back for this.
Yes,
and I intend to do so very soon. I'm a little bit concerned because obviously you have outmaneuvered me in the first round by kicking the CinemaBall into a corner that's got Jean-Claude Van Damme. Yeah. So I'm gonna have to work hard to get the CinemaBall out of there before you score a goal. So I will be working hard at this as I try and deal with this movie.
Okay. Well, everyone, that's going to do it for us this week. Thank you so much for joining us for this inaugural episode of CinemaBall. We'll see you back here next week for another round.
Bye, everybody.